Hey everybody, Dennis and Ace Boas coming at you here. And today, little guys by the way, I wanted to go over two different Boas of Belize. Had some questions asked recently what I think the differences are, so I want to go over them. This one right here, first and foremost, is a Caye Caulker. And he's young and he's a little jumpy. And these guys can all be a little jumpy in the beginning when they're young, but I find as they get older, they're as gentle as can be. When you're so small, I guess you got to be defensive. Or else you get picked up in the wild, and these guys couldn't put up much of a fight anyway. But look at that, how awesome he is. Anyhow, I just wanted to go over the difference between the Caye Caulker or Caulker's Cay. Same boa, by the way. Neither one's technically wrong saying. Same thing. Versus the Crawl Cay. This one right here in my hand right now is the Caye Caulker or Caulker's Cay. Same thing again. And I'll show you some of the differences in them. I mean, one of them, if you see these beautiful circles, which they both have, but these tend to be, on the Caye Caulkers, a little cleaner. As far as inside the speckling goes, they just tend to be a touch cleaner, I find. And they're both just beautiful boas. These live on Caye Caulker Island. And for those of you who have never been there, these live in the north part of the island. The island's very tiny. There's a lot of mangroves on the north end, and that's where they live. And the opposite end of the island's like that's where it would be, you can't call it touristy. It is touristy, but I would call it more backpack, right? Backpack, like hostiles. There's no giant resorts or none of that. But they are just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful dwarf boas, as you can see. And a pleasure for anyone to own. Definitely gaining, I feel, again, in popularity a ton. The Caye Caulker's been around a while. They've been around since the early 90s. If I had to pinpoint the year and take a shot, possibly 92. I'm sure one of the guys that are really into them, like Vin or Gus, could say the exact year, but it was definitely in the early 90s, that I do know. Actually, I know the story of exactly how they even came in, but I'm not full this year to share that. But anyhow, they were very lucky that they got here. Their main popularity, we can thank Gus for that, because he's the one that really got these going out there. And I think they've just grown and grown and grown since. I believe the original that came in was like a 1.2, and one of them I understand was gravid. So a lot of people say there's other lines, and that's not really the case from my understanding. It's just the one was gravid, and it had babies almost immediately. But that's how the story goes. But anyhow, these are absolutely gorgeous little boas. It's one of the few islands I've been lucky enough to go to. So I can tell you on the whopping two I've seen in my life that they're exact resemblance. It's, whenever you go look for any of these boas, it wouldn't be like you expect. They're not like running around, with the exception of possibly Hog Island. I've been out there, Cayos Cachinos. They're not littered all over the place or anything. And it's wet. It's the mangroves, you can take, you can kayak through them and stuff. You're not exactly going to run through them. And, a lot of times, first light, last sun is when you can catch them trying to soak in the last heat. They have a great capacity to hold heat, as all boas do. They can it's almost like they store it. It's pretty cool. They don't need much to eat. These eat, you can feed these once every 3 weeks, small item. As babies, I do a little more than that. But, I use rat pinks. Some people feel they start better on live hopper mice. And strike that. Let me say that. I agree with that. To start them on island boas, I still try frozen thawed, and I still get some to go right away. But a lot of times the island boas, I do have to switch back to live, because they can be tough to get going at times. But these dwarf boas are just gaining popularity like mad, and they're just incredible to work with. And, the ones from Belize in general are some of my favorites. Next, we'll get out also another thing about these, the Caye Caulkers, is I find the heads, I mentioned the less spots on them, right? Look at that beautiful just a beautiful animal. Look at that thing. It's not going to let me, but the head stamp, we would call it, right? Some people call it the head cross. It's the correct name is the head stamp. The head stamp on it is a little thicker. You would say like the, north to south is thicker, and so is the whole cross in general. It comes right between the eyes. It's just thicker on the Caye Caulkers, to my finding. I think I can get that in there pretty good. Hopefully it's showing it. And now I'll get out a crawl Caye and show you the differences. A little bit thicker body on these two, I find. They're both going to get about the same size, which I would have to say between the 4.5 to 5.5 foot mark is about where they'll be. And they'll be pretty thin. I mean, they'll be bigger than your thumb, but not a whole lot, and that's if fed correctly. If overfed, you kind of, again, there's going to be the argument that, that they can get much bigger out in the wild. The few that I've seen were not much bigger. If they can get there or not, I'm not going to argue about something I have or haven't seen. I would say even in the wild, they do not get very big. It's part of their how they live out there and how they feed. It just, they don't have the capacity to get huge out there. And they're just a race that, that's another thing that people talk about with either one of these before I pull the other one out. That, they're interbred, they're this. The island is tiny. I mean, a lot of these islands you go to, Cayos, they're tiny. These animals are interbreeding out in the wild by many, many decades of it. Probably longer than decades, way longer than decades, I'm sure centuries. And it's just, I imagine most of these animals got these islands on driftwood or maybe when everything was connected. I can't really say for a fact. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor that studied that area, so I couldn't tell you. But what I can tell you is they've been breeding with each other in these tiny islands. So interbreeding definitely happens. And there's something built in them that seems to prevent any sort of inbreeding depression. And they stay as healthy as can be, as you can see by this beautiful, beautiful example. By the way, I don't have any of these, so I do have a pair of these breeding up there. I should have these again this summer, but I sold out very quick. This one here was a holdback, but is also sold now. So let me get out the crawl Caye. Just give me a second here. I do everything live here, so as you know, there's no edits, there's no nothing here. It's just how we do it. I'll keep talking so that way I can hopefully somewhat keep your attention in the meantime. And put this guy back. And now come over here with the crawl Caye. And there you go, there's the crawl Caye. As you see, there's a lot more, I'd call it secondary marking. Speckling would be the correct word. Hopefully the camera can pick it up. They're much more speckled. This one happens to be a little thinner, I think just because it's a touch younger. The head stamp, if I can get it in there, you'll definitely see the thinner head stamp on these, if I can get it in there compared to the other one. And of course, you ain't going to want to show it. But the head stamps are thinner. And you can definitely see all that speckling and secondary marking. And it's just they're not as I guess clean looking boa would be the word you use. But, up till recently, in the trade though, I would say that these are more well known, the crawl Cayes. I mean, the crawl Cayes are brought into the country, I believe, as far back as the 80s. I believe Sears had brought in some of these too. But once again, I think the main interest and collection of these, I believe Boback went over there and did some research and brought back some, and I think that's how they came out to a zoo or something, and Vin and probably Gus with that too. I'm not particularly sure of how they came to be. I do know like when they came to be, and that was, like I said, the original animals came back in the 80s from Sears. And then I think the ones that we know today, the popular ones, came from a zoo from Boback, I believe. But I don't want to mark those. Don't mark me on any of that. I'm just telling you what I believe on that. As far as the boa goes, you can mark me on, but not that stuff. But they're both, this is another one. It's a dwarf boa. And I'd say sizing, again, I would say the same. A little thicker than your thumb. 5 foot, 5.5 foot. I think size-wise they're generally the same. If I had to say which one gets bigger, in my opinion, maybe by a touch, the crawl Caye. But, by just a touch. Amount worth not arguing about. It's pretty cool on the bellies. Look at the snake's bellies. A lot of the bellies are pretty, identifiable on a lot of snakes too. It's a part that a lot of people don't talk about. But, these are just awesome, awesome boas. And same thing, these probably feed over there on the same type of stuff, which is going to be birds and lizards, but they do just great in captive areas, feeding on rodents. And again, same for these. I'll always try to start anything I have on either a frozen thawed mouse or a frozen thawed rat pink. When I say mouse, let me strike that, right? Boy, that's an edit. They're much too tiny for that. When I mean a newborn rat pink, let me just straighten this out. A newborn rat pink, like born that day that I can pick out. I raise my own, so I'm lucky enough I can do that. Or a fuzzy mouse, frozen thawed. And again, not many of these will start right off that. Some will, and that's great. The rest, I'll end up starting them on a live fuzzy mouse. And generally with that, they end up taking within a couple tries with a vengeance, and they get going, you know. Again, I think I spoke about this on another video. I find the BCC a little easier to start than the island boas, but the island boas, once they get going, are good feeders. These two island boas for dwarf boas are pretty good feeders. When I get into hog islands, we'll talk about that. I think they're a lot tougher to get going, just in my opinion. But you know, he's not going to show his head stamp, which is thinner. At least I don't think he's gonna. But that is definitely one of the differences. And again, you can see all the differences in them. There are the circles there, right? They're just more spotty on these. And I want that because let me tell you, in my opinion only, this is strictly in my opinion, I've seen very few super clean crawl cays. I think they should be spotty. And, you know, I start to get suspicious with the animals and I see them super clean. In the wild, they're generally spotted up like this, and that's how they look, you know. I know through the years we've done our things with, you could say the same with anything, but because these animals, again, interbreed out there, I think that's how they all look. You know what I mean? And once again, the depression from interbreeding doesn't happen because, again, it's not a massive island. And Belize is pretty wild. It's made up of a bunch of islands over there. You know, and it's just a beautiful area. It's good for snorkeling also, just tropical paradise. You know, once again, no, it's definitely a little bit more, like in the States, I would call it country, not going by, of course, temperature, meaning like it's more of a backpacky area than massive, you know, like you go to Dominican Republic, right? You go along the coast, there's massive resorts, mega resorts built. It's not like that. And, which is good because I think if that stuff kind of came in, it would take animals like this and just totally wipe them out. You know, as people, we tend to destroy stuff. But anyhow, those are the two different boas from Belize I wanted to show you today. Maybe if you have a favorite, you can put it in the comments of one versus the other. But they're both wonderful. I'm happy to own them both. I do expect Caye Caulker babies later this year. I will have no crawl keys. Unfortunately, I did have an adult pair and one passed, and that was the end of that. So I'm growing these up, and I got these from Seth. These are Russo line. These are the real deal. And you know, once again, if you can get from a trusted source, that's always your best bet with any of these animals. Otherwise, it becomes a guessing game. Does a trusted source cost you sometimes $100 more an animal? Yeah, it probably does, but it's well worth it because you know, once again, you know what you're getting. You're getting what you're supposed to get, the real deal. And to me, that's kind of priceless. But anyhow, that's all I got. Please like, please share, please follow. Any questions, always ask. Ace Boas, over and out.